right, guys, I need to go over to UFC Fight Pass to do an interview. I'm going to be a guest. TJ Santis is going to host this. We're going to be joined, myself and Eddie Bravo, and we're going to do a bit of a preview for what to expect for this weekend. We got a lot of combat going on. UFC is going to be on ESPN on Saturday. Submission Underground is going to be on Fight Pass on Sunday. Take a listen.
I want to talk to you both about, I mentioned at the top, you're kind of pillars of the combat sports community. And, it's been about 3, 4, 5 years, I think now, since jiu-jitsu has really been this television type of sport. And Eddie, when you started the Eddie Bravo Invitational, you said that your goal was to get jiu-jitsu on television. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't think in a million years it would happen, or I thought it would happen, and then people would be bored to death and then would never go back and watch it again. It'd be short-lived. Then we have Chael Sonnen in Submission Underground, and both of you guys, I think, have elevated submission grappling from this niche of a niche to something that actually grabs, casual fans and turns them into not just, combat sports fans, but more importantly, grappling fans. And that's something I think both of you should really be proud of.
Thank you.
There you go.
Well, I'll tell you a little more on that, TJ. Thank you for saying that. But, between the two, Eddie definitely gets the credit on this. I mean, we came in the back. We were EBI fans. We were fans of the rule set. We were fans of the production. I fully agreed with Eddie, and he was the first one to say, look, jiu-jitsu can be mainstream. But one thing that Eddie and I did team up on and that we both saw early is we're not getting on SportsCenter unless we have the same rules. There is no basketball game or baseball game in the world where the basket isn't worth 2 points and a home run isn't worth 1 point. I mean, you have to be able to understand what it is. And so I thought it was very important that all promoters get on board with the EBI rules, make them the unified rules so we can actually crown champions. MMA can't do cross promotion for whatever reason. Eddie and I can do cross promotion. Polaris can do cross promotion. I can put my champions with Eddie's. We can put our guys with Polaris. We're the only sport that can actually do that the way the contracts work. We got to agree on the rules, though, and Eddie and I do.
Man, I just wanted to make a rule set where the competitors were the judges and the refs, and that's basically the way it is. I wanted to make a rule set where, since day one, since jiu-jitsu entered the United States in competition form, everyone's been complaining about the judges since 96, 97, the refs, the judges, refs. Everyone's always pissed every tournament. So it's not an old problem, or what am I saying? It's a totally old problem.
Right.
It's nothing new. So that's all I try to do is I just try to take the refs and the bias judging out of the mix and leave it entirely up to the competitors. And I think, rear naked choke shootout is probably the most entertaining way you can do that.
100%. I think the hardest pill for people to really swallow in grappling was the fact that you can invest yourself into a match that sometimes can be 20 or 30 minutes long, and there's no satisfying conclusion at the end of it. Chael, you say, a basket needs to be worth 2 points everywhere, and 100%, you need continuity, and we definitely have gotten that, I think, with both of your grappling promotions, and we've seen it carry on and evolve other places. Actually, Titan Fighting Championship is in action tomorrow night on UFC Fight Pass, and their show features a grappling match with JC Cavalcante, and it's going to be combat jiu-jitsu rules, essentially. It's 1 8-minute round inside the Titan FC cage with open hand strikes. And Eddie, that's something that you wanted to get involved with right away. Like, EBI was almost the byproduct of trying to push combat jiu-jitsu a little bit too quickly for the world. And now, combat jiu-jitsu is what you're mainly promoting, but now you see someone like Titan getting involved. What are your thoughts on that? Titan Fighting Championship having a combat jiu-jitsu match in a cage.
I love it. I mean, I'm not trying to control the combat jiu-jitsu scene. I'm trying to grow it. And as many people or as many promoters that want to do it, it's awesome. I want to see it. I want to see jiu-jitsu because there's such a big difference between grappling, just regular plain grappling, just no-gi grappling, and MMA. There's a tremendous difference. In grappling, without punches, sit-up guard and Z guard are the most popular guards. But when you add punches, those guards are the worst guards.
Right.
So there's a gigantic difference. So 99% of people playing jiu-jitsu without punches are playing Z guard or sit-up guard. Two guards that don't work in MMA. So that's a big problem. In my head, that's a big problem. It's too big of a gap between grappling with punches and grappling without, especially when it comes to bottom game. Top game, not as many differences, but bottom game for sure. It's totally different. Full guard is something that's unnecessary to win Abu Dhabi. You don't need to even play full guard ever, and you can win multiple ADCC championships. You don't need full guard. You don't need full guard to win EBI even.
Right.
But when there's punches, full guard becomes the most important guard. You want to put guys in full guard and fucking clinch on, get that overhook, head control. All of a sudden, the guard that's totally unnecessary in grappling is everything when there's punches. So there was such a big difference. And that I feel combat jiu-jitsu is right there in between MMA and grappling and makes grappling a little more realistic.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that you've been kind of preaching about, Eddie, is getting, the jiu-jitsu community to understand, like, what is more practical. And I think that we've seen grappling evolve as a whole since, the no rule or the submission-only rule set has been sort of adopted and sort of accepted by everyone. We've seen a lot of people change the entire approach that they had towards jiu-jitsu. And I think we've also seen that in mixed martial arts. Chael, you do submission underground, and it is in a cage, which is different than EBI. I think the environment there changes a lot of things. Do you think that cage has made people think differently about how they approach their ground games as well?
I've had people say that. I've had people say that. I'll use Jean-Jay Ribeiro, just by example, Ribeiro. But he was talking to me and he was saying, I really want to come out and do submission underground because I would like to get into MMA and I need a little more experience in the cage. And if you get pushed into the wall, or even if you're on bottom and you got to learn how to wall walk and get back to your feet, I think that there's some very realistic things you can get there. I like what Eddie's saying about maybe the ultimate transition that I've personally ever seen. I've been a fan since 1993 when this first came out. But maybe the greatest transition I've ever seen, and so many people thought it was grappling, and then you go right into MMA, or you're a kickboxer, and then you go into MMA and try to figure out the grappling on Saturday night in the cage. It's the combat jiu-jitsu. When I look at that, I have a son, if this is something he wants to get into, that's what I would really encourage him to do. It's gentle in many ways. It's open hands. There's a lot of sportsmanship, but it opens your mind. You're going to be, oh my goodness, I can't just do that. I can't go to Z guard or X guard. There's certain things I can't do. And it just seems like such a perfect transition to me.
Nothing is great as MMA. That's the best. It's got elbows, kickboxing, wrestling, everything. That's a beautiful thing. But, there's a collegiate wrestling, there's kickboxing, there's boxing, there's room for combat jiu-jitsu. And to me, it just, I didn't take anything away. I just added, because basically combat jiu-jitsu is basically EBI, which is strikes. So I'm not taking anything away. I'm adding, and I'm just trying to improve jiu-jitsu as much as I can and make it as realistic as possible and as exciting as possible. When you add strikes, in my experience between EBI and combat jiu-jitsu worlds, it's like, people like it. They like seeing blood. We've had blood. We've had a couple TKOs.
Right.
We've had big cuts. People like seeing that too, but that's not why I added the strikes. I didn't add the strikes to add for blood. I added the strikes for realism, to make sure that you're not doing some grappling techniques that are going to get you killed in reality. So it checks your jiu-jitsu. You find out what positions are safe and which are unsafe in realistic situations.
Yeah, and on that sort of appeal tip when it comes to the action and maybe excitement, maybe violence a little bit, I will say that Combat Jiu-Jitsu Worlds late 2019, Pearl Gonzalez, what she did to Lilian Borja's arm, that was one of the more visceral things I've ever seen in combat sports, period. So go look at that. But also, too, like, if you just want to fight, like, you want to be entertained by a fight, Submission Underground 1, Jake Shields versus Chris Lytle, one of the best fights I've ever seen. Nobody threw a strike.
And Eddie, if I could jump in on that, but Chris Lytle's claim to fame, and this actually got overrun about 6 months ago, but his big claim was he had never been submitted. He'd been boxing forever, then he went into MMA and had a great career, entering grappling tournaments, but nobody had ever submitted him. and he goes in there with Jake. He must have been caught 7 or 8 times. By God, Chris Lytle got out of every darn one of them. It was a great match. I agree with you, TJ.
People need to go check it out on the archive. Chael, I want to ask you a question about marketing a little bit when it comes to straight submission grapplers. We'll talk about Craig Jones a little bit later on, but we've started to see these superstars really sort of separate themselves from the pack on a level that I think it's been very hard for a lot of just straight submission grapplers to really, attain prior to these types of shows. Do you feel like a straight grappler, like a Craig Jones, like a Gordon Ryan? I mean, Floyd Mayweather status and Conor McGregor status is probably out of the realm of possibility as of now. But do you feel like people can become mainstream stars, mainstream combat sport athletes by just grappling?
Well, it's still a little bit of a niche, in all fairness. It's a little bit of a niche. I mean, I'm starting to see the wind blowing, and I don't mean to shine up Eddie and I on this, but in fairness, if everybody would just get along with the rule set so that the fans understood what they were watching anytime they see grappling, I mean, we could really take this thing to the next level very quickly. I've talked to ESPN. I've tried to get on SportsCenter with some of these big names. We've had John Jones grapple before. Some of these, they go, guys, we don't know what the rules are. We don't know how to explain this to the audience in a 4-minute segment. It's like, yeah, I can't help you. You're right. It's a little bit confusing. So if everybody would get on board, but it seems like anytime you start a grappling show, it's almost an ego thing, TJ. You just have to put your own rule. You just have to write your own rules in there. It's one of these really bizarre and baffling things that I don't know if we're going to overcome. Now, when you do talk about guys, stars being able to rise, social media has been very helpful. UFC Fight Pass. Look, if you're grappling and you matter, you live in one place, and that's UFC Fight Pass. The fans are learning where to go to get this kind of content, and these guys are able to separate themselves. And I think that what Eddie talked about earlier is very fair when he was talking, like, people do enjoy, I think violence was the word that was used. But in all fairness, I don't know how much we have to apologize for that. It's very regulated, it's very safe, but it'll open your eyes and make you alert, and that's kind of what the studying of martial arts is about. So if we're to use that theme, TJ, I look at the crowds that come to these grappling events, at least submission underground. I got kids in the crowd. I got mom and dad and grandma taking pictures of somebody compete. I mean, this is the most lighthearted audience you will ever see. But if you read the rule set, I've never seen anything more vicious. You're only allowed to do 3 things. You can choke a guy, make a guy plead for mercy, or you can break a limb. If you read the rules, you read the EBI rules, this is vicious.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It doesn't get more barbaric in a roundabout way.
You're encouraged to choke a guy or break something. I mean, it's pretty rough stuff here.
It's a simulated game of death.
Right, in many ways. Now, sports, thank goodness, but sportsmanship overrides all of that, right? Everybody in jiu-jitsu just gets the sports. But you bring up Craig Jones. Craig Jones is a gentleman to the highest of levels. He could send everybody to the ER. He never does. He gets what we call a catch, and he gives you an opportunity, just like it's practice, to stop. Guys are smart enough to stop.
One thing too that I like about jiu-jitsu, and we'll move on to some of the fight breakdowns after this, but it allows former MMA stars that are maybe past their prime or maybe no longer interested in competing that opportunity to still go out there and make that walk and put on a show for their fans all over the world. And I think that personally, I live in a great world when I can still see someone like Chris Lytle step in the cage with Jake Shields and they can put on a show. Like that's a great thing. And again, tomorrow night, JZ Cavalcante in action, one of the all-time MMA greats. If people aren't aware of some of the accomplishments that JZ had, in the 2000s, they're missing an entire issue of the MMA catalog that they need to kind of get caught up on, because that man is an absolute savage. And Eddie, you and I actually had a chance to call some of his fights, I guess you would call it, last year with Quintet Ultra. Jay-Z may not be competing for world titles anymore in MMA, but, the world is a better place when he's out there competing, because that man is a competitor with world-class skills still on the mat.
Absolutely. I worked with him before his fight against Shinya Aoki. I think it was back in 2007. And it was like a weird conflict of interest because I showed Shinya Aoki how to play the rubber guard, and he started fucking people up with it in Japan.
Right.
I don't know if you remember those days. Remember he used to wear tights?
Yep.
And then now Dan Lambert is a really good friend of mine, and he he owns American Top Team, and Jay-Z was there. So Dan asked me to come down and show him how to stop the rubber guard. So that was kind of weird. And basically it worked. I said, if you're caught in his rubber guard, don't move. Just stack them and don't open up your elbows, and it worked.
Well, there you
He
go.
lost the decision, though. He lost the decision, but he didn't get tapped.
I mean, that in a lot of ways, that's the victory right there, right? I mean, you shut down, losing. It's only an opinion. Even if it's the right opinion, it's only an opinion that you lost when the judges have to turn it in. So it's a lot better than yours.
It was weird. I don't think I'll ever do that again.
All right, let's talk about Submission Underground. It goes down this Sunday on UFC Fight Pass. It starts at 6 in the East, 3 in the West. Chael, the world has been shut down as of late, but Submission Underground, I think you guys have done more events in the last 3 or 4 months than you have maybe in the last year, it feels like.
Yeah, I'll tell you, what a puzzle, So we're out here in the Northwest, and governors of both Washington and Oregon, states that touch each other for anyone geographically impaired, but I will tell you, they really went hand in hand. And so we had a show lined up. Everything was on the dates. We're selling tickets, and we get an announcement that it's 250 people in a room at the same time. Okay, great. Check ticket sales. We're at 222. Bring in the staff. We're going to be right at 250. Stop ticket sales. Well, a week later, all 50 people in a room. Okay, great. Refund all the tickets. We'll just bring in the athletes and the staff. 10 people in a room. It drops down to 8 people. So we're starting to see how this goes and go, okay, just on our own, let's imagine it goes in half again, 4 people in a room. So putting that puzzle together of you got to have a referee, you got to have the athletes, you got to have a doctor. Who's going to film the show? So we had to bring in cameras, robotic, put them on cords, run it out of the building into a trailer where one director sat and ran the entire show off of robotics. I thought he did a fantastic job for the pieces he was dealt with. We had every fighter separated. It rains a lot in Oregon, so we had to bring in tents. We got 22 tents because we have 11 matches on the card. Clean the ring, top to bottom. I'm talking stairs, cage, walls, everything in between rounds. No announcers, no ring cargoes. When I tell you there was 4 people on the floor, there was 4 people on the floor. But we pulled it off, and that was how we did it. So I guess we did earn the name Underground.
How do you not just, tap out with all of that adversity?
I will tell you, it was a very fun puzzle to put together. I have to keep going back to that because, you got the pieces and you got to bring it all together. And ultimately, there's a finish line, which is 6 o'clock Eastern when the window opens and you go out to the world. But we never really considered that. We had a deal. And, there was a lot of things in place to make it happen. We had 3 different venues, and we didn't know which one we were going to go to. We had 3 venues in 2 different states because these states kept changing, but they weren't changing at the same day. And it really came down to that day. Are we going to have to go across the bridge into Washington State, or are we staying here in Oregon? It was just one of these things where you got to play the hand that you're dealt and do the best that you can. And we pulled it off. I was very proud of it. Part of me is bragging here, but it was a hard puzzle, and we did solve it.
You deserve it, because they were great events, too. I watched them on Fight Pass. It was a luxury to have live sports. You know what I mean? I realized that I don't need cable when there's not live sports. Nothing appeals to me other than sports live. And, Fight Pass was definitely my companion during some of the shutdown, and going to be my companion on Sunday as Submission Underground 14 takes place. Let's kick off that card breakdown with a pretty fun matchup between Brent Primus and Jake Shields. We talk about Jake Shields, really an elite level grappler, one of the greatest of all time in mixed martial arts, a very hard guy to finish. He takes on Brent Primus, who is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He got it in 6 years. If people aren't familiar with grappling arts and BJJ black belts, they're not handed out that quickly for 99% of the people, to be honest with you. What makes Brent Primus so special, Chael?
So I got to tell you, I went to college in a city called Eugene, and I live in Portland. It's about 2 hours from Eugene. And I'm up here in Portland. We got a hot thing going. Team Quest was a thing, and then we roll over to Gracie Baja, which is now American Top Team. But any who's who from the Portland area belonged in that circuit. And I keep hearing about this guy, Brent Primus, in Eugene. And I'm going, I lived in Eugene for 5 years. There is no MMA in Eugene. There is no jiu-jitsu in Eugene. What are you talking about? There's this guy in Eugene. I finally meet Brent Primus. This guy is such a hard worker. He finds the work. He's not afraid to get in his car and travel. He's not afraid to sleep on couches, to do whatever he needs to do to train. And when I finally meet this guy, I'm blown away. At his work ethic, at his attitude, he's a handsome guy. He's a young guy. He checks a lot of boxes, but he's also a rubber guard player that is a muscle shark. And that's not how people that do rubber guard go. These guys are flexible. These guys are lean guys. Brent Primus is a shark. He can pull his foot over his head, to do some of these techniques. He's just a really rare athlete. And much like Jake Shields, his number one quality isn't that black belt or even that experience. His number one quality is he has an iron will. There is no point in a match where he's going to check out and go, you know what, you want this more than I do. Never. He is going to try to beat you every second you're in there. That's what's so compelling about this match for me.
You know, when you look at a rubber guard player, a lot of people will play rubber guard, but they don't actually use it as an offensive weapon. Sometimes it's just to, and do scrambles and things like that. But Primus has a win via go-go plata. And, I mean, you have to have some supreme flexibility and understanding of positioning to pull that off. But, Eddie, he's taking on Jake Shields, who's a very fundamental wrestling-based, high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu player. I guess if you ask him, American jiu-jitsu player. Does Primus want to try to maybe utilize that rubber guard against someone who is so, fundamentally solid like Jake Shields is?
Well, the rubber guard, Jake Shields is no stranger to the rubber guard. He's been working with a lot of rubber guard players for a while. Like one of his training partners is Denny Procopos. He's a 10 planet black belt. And so he actually fought Boogie Martinez, who has arguably the best rubber guard in the world. He's right up there. So he's going to be ready for it. I'm not too sure about Primus's guard. I haven't really, he's got that go-go plata finish, but I haven't really sat down and analyzed his guard that much. I don't know if it's high level enough to affect Jake Shields. We'll see. You
mentioned Richie Martinez. He did tap out Jake Shields. Does that make Jake more vulnerable or more dangerous, do you think, Eddie? Because you can only look through a handful of times that Jake Shields has ever actually been submitted through 40-plus MMA fights and countless grappling affairs. This guy isn't finished. Coming off that loss, is he going to be more motivated or is he more vulnerable?
I would say more motivated. Generally, you usually come more motivated after a loss. I would think. I don't know. Maybe he fell into depression. I don't know. But I would think he's going to be as ready as ever. He doesn't want to go 2 losses in a row. That's for sure.
What do you think this will say about either of these guys, Chael, whoever gets the win? If Jake Shields gets the win, he stops a surging up-and-comer. And if Primus gets the win, I know it's a grappling event. It's not necessarily his MMA, fighting career, but I still think a lot of shine will be put on Brent Primus if he's able to get this win over Jake Shields.
Oh, come on. Combat is combat. This is what these guys live for. There's egos and pride. These guys are going to accept the result. They could be out there arm wrestling. If somebody gets over on the other one, you will look at him forever different, and he will look at you forever different. No, it's on the line for sure. I also like it because in Jake Shields, you have the former top contender from the UFC taking on the former champion from Bellator. And to bring up that cross-promotion angle again, that's just something that we haven't been able to see in MMA. But both the bosses of both organizations go, look, you guys want to go grapple? I'll send you my guy. I don't care what the result is, and I'm even going to watch and see what happens. It's one of these really fun things. Like, everybody is just into grappling. It doesn't matter if you're Coker or Dana or Eddie or Chael. Everybody just kind of gets it. And there's some matches that just need to happen. There's some guys that just want to go against each other. Sometimes it's a grudge, but generally in grappling, it's about, I'm actually curious. If you can beat me, that means you're going to teach me something. And you've got the straight guard, you've got the rubber guard. It's a totally different world right now. You got what the Danaher Death Squad is doing that we're all still trying to figure out a little bit. They're doing some stuff from half guard and with some of their ankle and leg manipulations that's ahead of the curve in all fairness. We want to see their guys. We want to slow those tape down. We want to study it. We want to figure out how to do it ourselves. And then we want to figure out how to beat it.
Yeah, it's going to be a fantastic matchup. Cannot wait to see that one coming up Sunday, part of Submission Underground 14. Also on that card, Austin Vanderford, he is back in action taking on Gabriel Checco. This was a match that was supposed to happen earlier this year. I think Checco got hurt. Vanderford coming off a really big win, a stoppage of Richie Martinez in overtime. Vanderford's got an arm triangle that you need to be very aware of. If he gets it, odds are your lights are going out. Break this one down for me, Chael. Vanderford and Checco.
Okay, so Eddie will back me up on this one, but you'll have guys, and Austin's one of them, who's a purple belt. He doesn't know a ton of techniques, and his repertoire is still kind of small, but he will have mastered certain positions better than black belts. He will have black belt positions. You bring up that head and arm triangle. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of his positions. He's also good at hanging on the back. If he gets into EBI, he's good at exploding He's one of these guys that sweats a lot, in all fairness, all right? He's a lot like Kyle Bain, where he'll just break a good sweat. You're going to have a hard time holding him should you get to overtime. So he's mastered the rules, he's understand it, and he loves to compete. And nobody really wants to go against Austin. He's got a purple belt, but his last 2 wins were both by submission over black belt. So, I mean, that's something really impressive and also rare within our community. His opponent, Gabriel Checco, was on the same card, got a submission over the great Jake Ellenberger, walks up to Austin in his 10th in the back where he was not supposed to be because of social distancing, puts a finger in his chest and says, "You and me next." Now, that would piss most guys off, but you just can't upset Austin. He's just so playful, and he says, "That sounds great. Let's let Chael know, see what he thinks." But what do I think? Think you guys are next.
I mean, it's going to happen Sunday. Main event, Submission Underground 14. It is Craig Jones versus Wagner Hosha. It is a rematch. Not a lot of people remember the first meeting between these guys that happened at EBI 11 with Hosha getting his hand raised in overtime. I think it was quickest escape time that got him the win that night. Jones has become a phenom since then. Really big wins, really successful accomplishments and titles have been racked up by him. Came very close to taking home the EBI absolute title, almost just narrowly missing an armbar on the great Gordon Ryan. This is going to be a really fun matchup for a variety of reasons. Wagner Hosha is one of the more grittier and grimier grapplers you will ever see. And by that, I mean he makes everything hurt. This might be the gentle art, if you will. I don't think there's anything with Wagner Hosha that is gentle. He is in your face. He's pushing you around. He is dragging you through the mud. And now with this matchup happening, they're already familiar with each other. We know that, but this is also in a cage. The first one wasn't in a cage. Eddie, do you think that Wagner Hosha may be able to use that fence and utilize maybe some tactics of the environment to, further dominate Craig Jones and get another win over the man?
Well, he does have a lot of MMA experience, and Craig Jones has none. So I'm sure he's going to be better off the cage. The biggest issue, in my opinion, is the size difference. I mean, Craig Jones has put on a lot of muscle since EBI 11, and Wagner Hosha still fights at 55. He's going to come back and do combat jiu-jitsu worlds when we do 55 as soon as all this corona nonsense is over. But see, that's the big issue right there. That Craig is fucking strong these days. He's giant. So is Wagner, and Wagner can and he does fight at 185 sometimes.
Right.
He'll take 185 fights. He likes fighting bigger too, but I don't know. I think maybe Craig is just too big, and he's so goddamn good. I don't know how Wagner's going to beat him. I don't know. I love Wagner, but I don't know. Craig just seems too big.
And I don't think that Wagner's afraid of any sort of a challenge, and that's why he's coming out to, get this one and do it again, try to make it more decisive than, EBI 11 where it was overtime. What are your predictions in this fight, Chael? Is this one that is going to go that full length like it did the first go-around, or is someone going to throw out something that we haven't seen between these two prior?
It's very hard to imagine Craig getting beat right now. I mean, Vinny Magliush is as good of a grappler as I have personally ever met. That match was over in a minute, and I realize it went a little bit longer, but the injury that happened and sent Vinny to the that happened within a minute. I mean, Craig Jones is something very unique and very special, and he's got a very unique game. You're not going to run into a lot of guys in the practice room that you're sparring and rolling with that are going to do to you what Craig does to you. He's a little bit of like remember when Lyoto Machida burst on the scene and he's doing all these karate and front kicks? Everybody go, what's this guy doing? I didn't know this worked in MMA, but you didn't have anybody to spar with. You didn't have any training partners that could mimic that. That's part of the deal with Craig. He's very unique, and you got to figure it out. Now, with that said, Wagner's already figured it out once. Wagner asked for this match, and Wagner, you're talking about he's a rough guy. He's mean. He is flat mean, period. He is the meanest guy. He's the most aggressive guy in jiu-jitsu. There is no point in that match where he's going to wilt. There is no point that he is going to concede or quit coming forward or quit put pressure on Craig. If he ends up getting swept from half guard, he gets arm drag, I think he's going to have some problems. Should it get to overtime? That's anybody's match because Wagner understands EBI strategy.
If you need to learn more about Wagner Hosha, maybe you're watching and you don't know anything about him, just do a YouTube search for Wagner Hosha and AJ Agazarm because there's something to see there.
That'll back up my claim. That'll back up what I said about him, though, right, TJ? He's mean. This guy's mean.
Yeah, 100%.